Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Facebook Incorporated upholds suspension of account of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Britain to invest a further £30 million into research for vaccines against new COVID-19 variants. Plus, insurgents in Mali released video of a kidnapped journalist appealing for help. A warm welcome to the show. I'm Amarakshi Ubani in Lagos. Former U.S. President Donald Trump will not be returning anytime soon to Facebook and Instagram, no thanks to a decision by Facebook Incorporated's oversight board upholding the company's suspension of his accounts in a much-awaited verdict that may signal how the company will treat rule-breaking world leaders in the future. Facebook indefinitely blocked Trump's access to his Facebook and Instagram accounts over concerns of further violent unrest following the January 6 storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of the former president. At the time of the suspension, Facebook chief executive Mark Zuckerberg said in a post that the risks of allowing the president to continue to use our service during this period are simply too great. The company later referred the case to its recently established board, which includes academics, lawyers, and rights activists to decide whether to uphold the ban or restore the president. Kate Klonick, an assistant law professor at St. John's University, who embedded at Facebook to follow the board's creation, said both of those decisions are no-win decisions for Facebook. So offloading those to a third party, the oversight board, is a win for them no matter what. And the binding verdict marks a major decision for the board, which rules on a small slice of challenging content decisions and which Facebook created as an independent body as a response to criticism over how it handles problematic material. Facebook has also asked the board to provide recommendations on how it should handle political leaders' accounts. We're still in the United States. The trial may be over and the conviction given, but former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin believes he still stands a chance at freedom. His legal team has requested a new trial based on his decision. Chauvin's legal team filed court documents alleging misconduct by both prosecutors and jurors. According to his lawyer, Chauvin was deprived of a fair trial. U.S. media had already reported that the request for a new trial was suspected and is a common move following a conviction. But it is unlikely that the jury's decision would be overturned because of the evidence in the case. We'll have more on that a bit later. But coverage of the COVID-19 global pandemic continues. The government of the Seychelles is reimposing COVID-19 restrictions to help bring cases under control amid a surge in cases. This comes despite the island nation fully vaccinating more than half of its population. The country has recorded around 1,000 active cases, a third of whom had 2 vaccine doses. Here's a global update.
The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the United States topped 32.5 million on Tuesday, with the death toll exceeding 578,000, according to the Johns Hopkins University. The U.S. has recently become a target of strong criticism following the disclosure it's been hoarding extra 60 million doses of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Countries plagued by the pandemic, including Bangladesh, Mexico, and Kenya, have called for the U.S. to aid the international community by offering its surplus. Malaysia has started a parallel COVID-19 inoculation program for people who choose to receive the AstraZeneca vaccine after it was removed from an ongoing rollout due to public fears over its safety. Though reports of possible links to very rare blood clots have dented confidence in the shot in the country and elsewhere, the slots for 268,000 doses were filled in just 3 hours after booking opened on Sunday, May the 2nd. Over in the Philippines, health workers are holding door-to-door vaccinations for bedridden individuals in hopes of driving its vaccination program and to protect more vulnerable people from the disease. In Makina City, residents who cannot make the trip to vaccination centers due to their pre-existing conditions were told to register online. A team of medical frontliners will later be dispatched to visit the individual and after a series of medical checks will administer the Sinovac vaccines. Finally, in Brazil, anger surged in Rio de Janeiro after locals who turned up for newly arrived Pfizer vaccines were disappointed to find the immunization site had run out. Brazil started giving its first Pfizer jabs on Tuesday, and following reported problems of blood clots with the AstraZeneca vaccine, there are many in the region opting for Pfizer. The country still has the world's second highest coronavirus death toll after the United States.
International assistance continues for India as vaccines, beds, oxygen are being donated to the country as cases surge. Meanwhile, the country continues to post daily record numbers of COVID-19 cases. Canada, the government has just authorized the use of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine for children aged 12 to 15, becoming the first country to do so for that age group. The Health Ministry made the decision based on data from Phase 3 of the clinical trials on children that age. Canada has already authorized the use of the Pfizer vaccine in people over the age of 16. The country has recorded more than 1.2 billion coronavirus cases, and roughly 20% of those have been in people under the age of 19. Children's risk of becoming very ill or dying with COVID-19 is tiny, and throughout the pandemic, they have very rarely needed hospital treatment. The German Health Minister Jens Spahn says the world was insufficiently prepared in the fight against the pandemic. This comes as Germany and the World Health Organization announced the creation of a new global hub in Berlin for gathering data on pandemics. Speaking at a virtual news conference attended also by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the head of the WHO, Spahn said the world needed stronger early warning and emergency response system.
So far, the world is insufficiently prepared for this. In our highly interconnected world, pandemic risks need to be identified as early as possible to prevent rapid global transmission of an infectious disease, as we have all witnessed and still do with COVID-19. While we all have made progress in developing public health intelligence and risk analysis capacities, a globally concerted approach under WHO's leadership must be firmly established. There's a clear need for a stronger global early warning, alert, and emergency response system with improved public health intelligence and interdisciplinary risk analysis that supports decision makers worldwide. Better data and better analytics are key for better decisions. A WHO hub for pandemic and epidemic intelligence can make the difference for a safer future.
Britain is continuing research into more COVID-19 vaccines to help deal with variants of the disease. Now, as such, the government has announced it is investing a further £30 million into laboratory facilities at Porton Down. And when completed, the labs will be able to test 3,000 blood samples a week for antibodies generated by vaccines. Health Minister Matt Hancock said in a statement that the investment would enable the UK to further future-proof the country from the threats of new variants. Britain, which has a population of 67 million, has deals for over 510 million doses of 8 different COVID vaccines, some of which remain under development. Just to remind you, our lead stories on this bulletin this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump will not be returning to Facebook and Instagram, all thanks to a decision by the Facebook Incorporated, which has been overlooking the president's account in a much-awaited verdict today. They announced that they will not be returning the former president back on those accounts over concerns of further violent unrest following the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of the former president. It may signal how the company will treat rule-breaking world leaders in the future. Also, Derek Chauvin, the former U.S. Minneapolis police officer who was convicted last month in the murder of George Floyd, has requested a new trial based on his decision. His legal team says there was misconduct by both prosecutors and jurors. They also say that Chauvin was deprived of a fair trial. US media already reported that the request for a new trial was expected and is a common move following a conviction, but it is unlikely that the jury's decision will be overturned because of the evidence in the case. Maria Bird is in Washington. She joins us now. Maria, let's begin with Derek Chauvin. What is the controversy surrounding the jurors' conduct during the trial?
The controversy is really around the initial questioning. So there were an initial set of questions that all jurors had to answer relative to their exposure and their knowledge of the George Floyd case. And so the jurors, obviously, most of them stated they were very unaware, which as many across the world and obviously in the U.S. were surprised to hear that people were not very much aware of the news media that had covered this case back in May of 2020. And so there was obviously footage shown of the juror at the March on Washington with Black Lives Matter paraphernalia being worn. And so, but the question that many are focusing on is the question was relative to if that juror had specifically been a part of protests in Minnesota. And I think that is where there's going to be a distinction made there. And so that's really where the controversy comes from is there's trying to be a push to state that this juror had a bias in his affection toward the Black Lives Matter movement, which we know took a huge resurgence as a result of the George Floyd case.
Pretty interesting. But let's go now to the former president, Donald Trump, who's already launched his own social media accounts. So apparently he does not need Facebook, does not need Instagram to pass his thoughts across to followers. But what is the likelihood that he can gather as much clout as he usually has in the past? And what's the likelihood that this new account will thrive?
Well, we know that it was supposed to just have launched on Tuesday, his new social media site, but it appears as if there's blog posts going all the way back to the 24th of March. And many people are saying this is more of a blog piece. It reminds you more of like a Twitter social media account. And so it's really going to impact his base. Those in his base are probably most likely going to be a part of this social media platform. The challenge that he has is media outlets, social media outlets like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter are platforms that are global and that are able to reach those individuals who are not a part of his base. And so that's where he's going to be challenged with having just his own social media platform rather than being allowed back on the Facebook platform at this time.
Maria, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, stay with us on The World Today, still ahead. Well, one Nigerian chef is gaining an international acclaim for putting a spin on Nigerian cuisine. Join us again. Welcome back. Scottish First Minister NICOLA Sturgeon says the stakes are high in the Parliament election, adding the country needs to come out of its strong, experienced leadership. Speaking in Aberdeen, one of the stops on her campaign trail, the Scottish leader said that if there is a pro-referendum majority in the Scottish Parliament, no politician has any democratic way to stand in its will. She was referring to an earlier comment by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson had said earlier today that most people do not think now is a good time to hold a second referendum for an independent Scotland, which he called reckless and irresponsible.
Well, this election really matters. The outcome of it matters. The stakes are high. The country is living through the biggest crisis most of us can remember, and it's really important that we come out of this election with strong, experienced leadership ready to take the next decisions to get us out of lockdown, back to normality, and to build a better country. And the only way to secure that tomorrow is to cast both votes for the SNP. Anything else leaves it to chance, and this is too serious a time for that. Let's focus the day before an election on the basic principle of democracy. If people in Scotland vote for something, if there's a pro-referendum majority in that Scottish Parliament, then no politician of whatever stripe has any democratic right to stand in its way. And I think it's the principle of democracy that should take precedence as we go into this election. But again, let me stress that that comes after the crisis.
Spanish Coast Guards have rescued 30 migrants traveling in a dinghy 13 miles off Gran Canaria in the Atlantic Ocean and transported them to the port of Arguinguin, where 5 of them were taken to hospital. Emergency services, clad in Hamzat suits, were seen carrying an unconscious woman on a stretcher off the Coast Guard vessel. The dinghy, carrying 19 men, 8 women and 3 children, was located by a Coast Guard plane at 9:20 GMT. The number of undocumented migrants arriving in the Canary Islands has increased 134% compared to the same period in 2020, with the impact of COVID-19 on tourism and other industries in North and Sub-Saharan Africa pushing many more to embark on the dangerous journey. Not one drop of Japan's Fukushima radioactively contaminated water should be released until the world is convinced that the water has been treated to remove nuclides to non-detectable levels, according to a U.S. marine conservation biologist. He wrote in an article earlier this week. The Japanese government announced last month it had decided to discharge contaminated radioactive wastewater in Fukushima Prefecture into the sea. Well, the Biden administration must urge Japan to abandon this unnecessary and dangerous plan, says the biologist Rick Steiner in his article. As of December 31st, 2019, 73% of the nuclear wastewater exceeded Japan's discharge standards after treatment by an advanced liquid processing system capable of removing most contaminants, according to a report from an organization researching the treatment of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear accident. A journalist who disappeared last month in Mali's northern city of Gao appeared in a video today appealing to authorities to do everything they can to free him from Islamist militants holding him hostage. French journalist Olivier Dubois said he was kidnapped by the JNIM on April 8th. In a 21-second video shared on social media that is yet to be verified by authorities, French civilians have long been favored targets for kidnapping by criminals and Islamist groups in West Africa's arid Sahel region, partly because of perceptions that the French government is prepared to pay ransoms to secure the release. France has repeatedly denied paying ransoms for hostages. The French Foreign Ministry said it was in contact with the Olivier's family and carrying out technical checks on the authenticity of the video. Malian authorities were not immediately available for comment on the video, but Dubois is the first French national to be taken hostage by jihadist militants in Mali since French aid worker Sophie Petronin was freed in October last year. She had been abducted near Gao in late 2016. More cheery news. Now we talk about food. So gather around, you foodies. Nigeria's version of jollof rice may have gained global reputation, but there is a lot more to be done if Nigerian cuisine is to attain international appeal. Not my words, but they're according to international chef of Nigerian origin, Izu Ani, who says he has plans to promote local Nigerian delicacies in the global restaurant industry. The Delta State-born culinary expert who recently received Dubai's famed Golden Visa shared this and more with Channels Television's Dubai correspondent, Mayowa Adeguki.
Nigerian-born British chef Izu Ani, who was recently awarded a 10-year golden visa by the Dubai government, has revealed plans to showcase Nigerian food to the world in a bid to put the country in a more positive light.
It's about how you place the culture in people's world, because they will get curious when they taste something delicious. They say, where's this from?
Ani, an avid cyclist, is one of Dubai's most awarded chefs, with several restaurants in his portfolio, including one of the top 50 restaurants in the world, La Petite Maison. He believes a better showcasing of Nigerian cuisine and culture can boost its tourism sector.
I've always wanted to do Nigerian food, but done with the education and understanding and training of where I've been from. Because for me, this is where the value, where I come back to Nigeria, not to take from them, but to come with my mindset. Because I've been to Nigeria a few times, and the structure of the restaurants, it's a different mentality. But imagine if you bring the mentality of what I've learned into the culture and the way we eat, it will elevate it remarkably.
Born in Asaba, Delta State in 1977, Annie spent his early childhood in Onitsha before relocating to the United Kingdom in 1984, where his mother raised him. Her cooking has influenced his career and approach to food.
I grew up with my mother. She cooked ofe, akbo, gari, everything, all that. So I grew up with the African food within me, and I love it. Every time I go back to London, I phone her, I tell her I'm coming. She goes, what soup do you want me to cook? My favorite, ogushi soup. Ogushi soup, so delicious. There's so many, everything inside of it. There's there's pumpkin seeds, dried out, crushed. But there's akara fish, which is dried kind of cod. There's like little prawns where you dry that's inside. They put so many different flavors. That's what I love about it. It's deep in flavor. And that's how I like my food to be. It's depth.
Having mastered his culinary skills across Europe, South America, and Asia, Izu moved to Dubai, UAE in 2010, where he's now established his own restaurants and catered to several high-profile clients, including the Crown Prince of Dubai. He is especially proud to have received the Golden Visa, which grants him permanent residency in the UAE for a renewable 10-year stay.
It makes me proud to be recognized. Every recognition shows the hard work.
Although their identities are still unknown, other Nigerians have reportedly received the same honor from the Dubai government, a likely sign of his interest in the Nigerian market, which was the city's fastest growing source market for tourism in 2019. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Mayowa Adegoke for Channels Television News.
I would have loved to see more Nigerian delicacies there. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.